The municipal courtroom smelled like dust and old varnish. Fluorescents hummed. A wall clock ticked like a metronome that everyone pretended not to hear. At the defense table, Staff Sergeant Malik Turner, U.S. Army Return, tugged at a suit jacket he hadn't worn since a cousin's wedding. His VA-issued cane leaned against his chair, its rubber foot freckled with scratches from hospital hallways and uneven sidewalks. Behind him, benches creaked as people shifted. Traffic tickets, landlord disputes, a busker cited for disturbing the peace. When the bailiff called State Version Turner, a murmur pulsed through the gallery. Malik rose, steady but slow, the habit of standing for rank stitched into muscle memory. At the prosecutor's table, Officer Brent Harlan adjusted the knot of his tie with the same easy arrogance he wore on patrol. His patrol cap wasn't here to complete the uniform, his smirk did the job. "Finally," Harlan muttered, loud enough for the nearest row to hear. "Let's get this circus over with, hero." Malik's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes forward. Years had taught him that you don't look at a provocation. You look through it, into the work at hand. Judge Eleanor Reyes entered from chambers in a sweep of black fabric. The room rose. She was a former public defender with calm eyes and a gavel she rarely used. She didn't need to. Respect tended to appear when she did. "Please be seated," she said. Calling State versus Turner, case number 21142. Her gaze traveled from prosecutor to defense, then settled on the man with the cane. "Mr. Turner, good afternoon." "Good afternoon, Your Honor," Malik said, voice even. At his shoulder, Avery Kim, a public defender with careful hands and a mess of tabbed notes, leaned in. "I'll do the talking unless you need to clarify," she whispered. He nodded once. The cane tip brushed the floor like a period at the end of a sentence. The prosecutor began, "Your Honor, the state's case is simple. Officer Harlan observed the defendant obstructing a lawful arrest on the 400 block of Ellington. When instructed to step back, the defendant refused, interfered, and, per the report, became verbally aggressive. He was warned, he persisted. Standard obstruction." Judge Reyes tilted her head. "Who was being arrested?" "A young man suspected of shoplifting, Your Honor." The defendant placed himself between Officer Harlan and the suspect and refused to comply with commands. Avery stood. "We contest that characterization, Your Honor." Mr. Turner was filming the stop on a public sidewalk and asking the officer to loosen handcuffs that were visibly cutting off circulation. He remained outside the taped perimeter. He never crossed the line. "Visibly cutting off circulation," Harlan said, scoffing. "What is he, a doctor now?" Avery didn't flinch. "He's a retired Army medic, actually." Harlan barked a laugh. "So that's why he thinks he can play cop." He dragged his eyes over Malik. "You had your war. This is the real world. Out here, we handle things. You're not in uniform anymore, buddy." The bench murmured, someone hissed, and the bailiff's gaze snapped to the gallery. Judge Reyes raised a palm and the room hushed. She looked to Harlan. "Officer, you are here as a witness, not to editorialize. One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." She turned back to Avery. "Go on." Avery clicked her pen. "Here's the footage, Your Honor." She connected a phone to the evidence monitor. The video filled the courtroom. Blue lights ricocheting off storefront glass, night air vibrating with radio chatter. Malik's voice, calm, patient. "Sir, his hands are purple. Please check the cuffs. I'm not crossing the tape." On the screen, Harlan leaned into the lens. "Step back or you're going in cuffs." The camera's frame wobbled as Malik's cane tip scraped concrete. A young man's fingers, thin and shaking, twitched against metal far side of his back. Judge Reyes watched without blinking. "Pause there." The frame froze. A band of white plastic tape, a boot toe, cuffed hands. "Counselor, distance?" 7 feet, Your Honor," Avery said. "We measured the sidewalk yesterday." Reyes nodded once, eyes sliding to Harlan. He rolled his shoulders as if none of this mattered. "He was escalating my scene," Harlan said. "I needed control." "It looks like Mr. Turner was asking you to assess tight cuffs," Reyes said. "That's not escalation, that's a request." Harlan scoffed, louder this time. "With respect, Your Honor, guys like him think a phone makes them supervisors. He kept saying medic like we should salute him or something." Something flickered in the judge's face, gone as quickly as it arrived. "Mr. Turner," she said, "do you wish to address the court?" Avery touched his sleeve. "You don't have to." Malik rose anyway because some lessons you never unlearn. He faced the bench, not the man who'd cuffed him. I was 10 feet back, then 7, he said, voice steady. I told Officer Harlan I was a medic because the kid's fingertips were dusky and he said they'd been on for 15 minutes. That's long enough to cause nerve damage. I asked him to check capillary refill. He lifted his hand as if holding a memory. Press the nail, count to 2. It should pink up. It didn't. Harlan snorted. Capillary what? Refill, Malik said. A basic circulation check. So you were playing doctor, Harlan said, triumphantly dull. Malik kept his face a mask. I was playing human. A silence spread, clean and taut. Judge Reyes leaned forward. Mr. Turner, your service record. Do you have it with you? Avery handed up a folder. Reyes read quickly. The courtroom's ambient sound, the whisper of jackets, the wheel of the stenographer's machine, receded under the weight of what she saw. 12 years active duty, 2 deployments, combat medic badge, bronze star with V device. Attached was a photo. Malik in desert camo, dust grit on his grin, one arm around a young soldier who couldn't quite hide how much he trusted the man beside him. Reyes closed the folder gently, like returning a flag to a family. Officer Harlan, she said, voice cool. You told this court that Mr. Turner expected you to salute him. She let the line hang, then turned back to Malik. I don't give those lightly. She rose. The gallery rustled, surprised. The bailiff's eyes widened. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Judge Eleanor Reyes straightened to her full height, hands at her sides as if remembering a different uniform from a different life. Then she brought her right hand to her brow in a crisp, perfect salute. It was not to humiliate the officer. It was not to play to the room. It was a simple act addressed to a single man who had refused to let a boy's hands go numb in the name of control. For a heartbeat, Malik didn't move. You don't accept a salute in civilian court. You don't accept it at all, unless you must. But some honors you don't refuse because they aren't yours. They belong to the people whose names are etched in your memory like dog tags. He placed his fingertips to his temple, returning it, not as pageantry, but as acknowledgement, of service, of the kid with purple hands, of the costly difference between authority and duty. When he lowered his hand, the room exhaled. Judge Reyes sat again, gavel untouched. On the merits, she said, voice steady, this charge is dismissed. Harlan exploded. Are you serious? The bailiff's bark cut him off. Officer, Reyes didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. We are done with theatrics. Mr. Turner, you are free to go. Officer Harlan, you will remain. We're going to watch this video again, and this time we'll discuss policy. Avery gathered the folder, hands shaking for the first time all day. Malik reached for his cane. The rubber tip found the floor and, like every step he'd taken since coming home, held. Outside the courtroom, the corridor buzzed. Word traveled faster than the elevator. A janitor paused with his cart, eyes shining. Thank you, he said softly. For what? Malik asked. For not letting that kid's hands go numb, the man said. And for the rest of it too. Malik nodded once and moved on. Somewhere behind him, a clock started ticking again. Somewhere ahead, a door swung open to the afternoon in its honest light. The hallway outside courtroom 3 buzzed like a shaken hive. Reporters had drifted in for other cases, but now every camera lens pointed toward the heavy wooden doors Malik Turner had just stepped through. Word of the salute was spreading before the echo of the gavel had even faded. Malik gripped his cane tighter, his step steady though his chest still hummed with adrenaline. Avery Kim caught up to him, whispering, "Don't answer questions, keep moving. I'll handle the press." The reporters didn't care about handlers. Mr. Turner, what do you think of the judge's salute? Do you feel vindicated? How does it feel to be disrespected by an officer after serving this country? Malik raised his hand, not in anger, but in quiet refusal. Not today, he said. His voice carried enough weight to stall the crowd. He moved through, each step declaring its own restraint. Back inside the courtroom, Judge Eleanor Reyes remained seated after dismissing the gallery. Only Officer Harlan lingered, his arms folded tight across his chest, jaw clenched. Officer, she said calmly, sit down. He dropped into a chair like gravity had doubled. Reyes rewound the video feed on the monitor. We're going to watch this again, and this time, you're going to tell me what you see, not what you assumed. The footage replayed. The blue lights, Malik's steady voice, the trachea of tension in every frame. Harlan squirmed. He was interfering. Reyes cut him off. Watch closely. He is 7 feet away. He is not crossing tape. He is raising a medical concern which you ignored. That young man's fingers are visibly cyanotic. Do you know what that means? Harlan hesitated. It means blue, she said, sharp as a scalpel. It means lack of circulation. It means danger. And a man who carried soldiers off battlefields recognized it instantly while you dismissed him. So I'll ask you again. What do you see? Harlan swallowed, sweat prickling at his hairline. I see him talking. Reyes leaned back. No. You see yourself refusing to listen. That's not law enforcement, that's ego. Silence pressed down until Harlan dropped his gaze. Officer, she said finally, this court may be finished with the case, but your department won't be finished with you. And neither, I suspect, will the public. By the time Malik reached the courthouse steps, the crowd outside had doubled. People weren't chanting, not yet, but a ripple of applause broke out when they recognized him. He stopped at the top of the stairs. For a moment, Kane planted firm. He considered saying nothing, walking on into anonymity. But he saw the faces. A mother with her teenage son, a veteran in a faded ball cap, a young man still wearing scrubs from the night shift. They were waiting not for spectacle, but for truth. He lifted his chin. I didn't come here for a salute, he said. I came here to defend myself against something I didn't do. But let me be clear, respect isn't given with a gavel or a badge or even a salute. Respect is proven, and today you all proved it by standing here. Applause cracked like thunder. Reporters scribbled. Someone shouted, Sergeant Turner, are you a hero? He shook his head. No, heroes don't stand alone in courtrooms. Heroes are the ones we carry with us. The men I served beside. The kid whose hands shouldn't have gone numb. If you want to honor me, honor them. With that, he descended the steps, each click of his cane a punctuation mark. News spread fast. That night, clips of the salute dominated every network. Anchors spoke with reverence. In a stunning moment of dignity, Judge Eleanor Reyes rose and saluted Black Army veteran Malik Turner after dismissing charges brought by Officer Brent Harlan. Social media blazed. Hashtags bloomed. Salute for respect. Hashtag veteran in court. Justice stands. Memes showed Malik steady with his cane beside the judge's raised hand. Veterans groups posted statements of solidarity. Malik sat in his small apartment, television muted, the hum of the fridge filling the quiet. Naomi, his daughter, home from college, sat across from him, laptop open, scrolling through feeds. Dad, she said, eyes wide, you're everywhere. They're calling it the salute heard around the country. He frowned. I don't want to be a headline. I just wanted the truth to stand. Naomi leaned forward. Maybe that's why it matters. Because you weren't asking for attention. You were asking for respect. Meanwhile, Officer Harlan's name began to circulate too, though not the way he wanted. Internal Affairs launched a review of his conduct. News crews camped outside his precinct. His fellow officers avoided eye contact in the locker room. On an online forum, someone posted his mugshot beside Malik's service record. The caption read, "One disrespected dignity, one carried it." Comments poured in, most unkind. Harlan slammed his laptop shut, heat in his chest. They'll forget, he muttered. But the chants outside his window, neighbors watching the news, cheering the salute, told him otherwise. At the courthouse the next day, Judge Reyes sat in chambers, pen tapping lightly against a legal pad. Her clerk peeked in. Your Honor, the phones haven't stopped ringing. Veterans groups want to thank you. Reporters want statements. Even City Council wants to hold a hearing. Reyes sighed. I didn't salute for headlines. I saluted because respect was earned. If the world needed to see that, then so be it. The clerk hesitated. And Officer Harlan? Reyes's eyes hardened. He'll answer to more than me. That night, Malik stood on his porch, cane resting against the railing. Naomi joined him, phone in hand. Dad, look, someone painted a mural already. You and the judge, saluting. She turned the screen toward him. He stared at the colors, the brush strokes of honor. Then he shook his head. I don't need murals. Naomi smiled. Maybe not, but maybe the world does. Malik gazed at the stars overhead, steady as sentries. Then let them paint. As long as they remember respect isn't art, it's action. By dawn the next morning, Houston was humming with a different kind of energy. Every news station replayed the same 30-second clip. Judge Eleanor Reyes rising to her feet, saluting Staff Sergeant Malik Turner, and his deliberate return of that salute. Anchors described it with words usually reserved for war memorials or state funerals. Solemn, historic, unprecedented. In coffee shops, televisions glowed with the footage. Commuters on buses shared the clip on their phones. At barber shops and breakfast diners, people debated what it meant. Some saw it as a rebuke of arrogance in uniform. Others saw it as a reminder that respect could still be recognized in the most unlikely of places. For Malik, it was just Tuesday. He sat at his kitchen table, oatmeal cooling in front of him. His daughter Naomi read aloud from her laptop. "Dad, listen to this headline. The salute that shook a courtroom. And here, from defendant to defender of dignity." He stirred his oatmeal but didn't eat. "Naomi, I'm not trying to be a headline. I just wanted the court to see the truth." She closed the laptop, studying him. "Maybe that's why it matters so much. Because you weren't asking for attention. You were asking for fairness, and people are starving for that." By mid-morning, veterans groups began organizing. The American Legion issued a statement. Staff Sergeant Turner reminded this nation that respect is never outdated. "We stand with him." A local VFW post announced a rally outside the courthouse. Within hours, hundreds of veterans, men and women in worn ball caps and faded unit jackets, were on their way downtown. One Vietnam veteran interviewed on camera said, "I didn't know Turner personally, but I know his kind. Quiet, steady, doesn't ask for thanks. That salute was for all of us." Inside the precinct, Officer Brent Harlan felt the ground shift beneath him. Internal Affairs had already summoned him twice. His captain refused to meet his eyes. When he walked into the locker room, conversation stopped. On the television mounted near the vending machines, the clip played again. The judge, the salute. The room fell silent. "Turn that off!" Harlan barked. No one moved. A younger officer finally spoke. "Maybe you should have just listened to the guy, Brent." Harlan's jaw tightened. "You weren't there." But the words landed flat. He grabbed his gear and left, the eyes of his colleagues burning holes in his back. At the courthouse steps, Malik found himself swept into a scene he never asked for. Veterans lined the stairs, some standing at attention, others saluting as he approached. News cameras panned across rows of faces, black, white, Latino, men and women who had worn uniforms in wars separated by decades but connected by duty. A reporter shouted, "Sergeant Turner, what do you think of this show of support?" Malik paused, cane planted firm. "I think respect isn't about uniforms or titles. It's about how we treat each other when no one is watching. These men and women know that. They lived it." The crowd erupted in cheers. Naomi stood nearby, eyes wet, whispering to herself, "They're carrying it now." Judge Reyes, meanwhile, watched the coverage from her chambers. Her clerk asked, "Your Honor, are you comfortable with all this attention?" Reyes sipped her tea. "I didn't salute for cameras. I saluted because he earned it. If the world needed to see that, I won't apologize." That evening, Malik finally allowed himself a quiet moment. He sat on his porch, the cicadas humming in the twilight. Naomi joined him, scrolling through her phone. "Dad, it's not just here. Look, New York, Atlanta, Chicago. Veterans are marching with signs that say respect is duty. People are sharing stories about bias they've faced. It's like what happened to you cracked something open." Malik sighed. "I didn't mean to start anything." Naomi smiled softly. "Maybe that's why it started. Because you weren't chasing it. You just stood your ground." Across town, Harlan sat alone in a bar, nursing a drink. On the television above the counter, Malik's face filled the screen as anchors praised his dignity. Patrons raised their glasses in respect. The bartender looked at Harlan. "That's the guy you tangled with, isn't it?" Harlan stiffened. "So what?" The bartender shook his head. "You picked the wrong man to disrespect. Now the whole city knows it." Harlan left cash on the counter and stormed out, the door banging shut behind him. Back at home, Malik looked up at the night sky. The stars shimmered faintly through the haze. He thought of soldiers he'd served with, those who came home, those who didn't. He thought of the boy whose hands had gone purple in the cuffs and how a simple request for dignity had sparked all this. Naomi placed her hand over his. "You know what's happening, don't you?" He shook his head. She smiled. "Respect is no longer just yours to fight for. It belongs to everyone now." Malik closed his eyes, letting the night air fill his lungs. For the first time since the arrest, he felt something close to peace. By the end of the week, the story had leapt from Houston's evening broadcasts to every major national network. Morning shows replayed the clip of Judge Eleanor Reyes rising to salute Malik Turner before dismissing his charges. Headlines scrolled across the bottom of screens. Salute for justice, courtroom moment goes viral. Black veteran honored after racist court clash. From defendant to symbol of dignity. Malik sat at his kitchen table, flipping channels with growing discomfort. Naomi leaned against the counter, phone in hand, scrolling through articles. Dad, CNN wants an interview. So does MSNBC. Even late-night hosts are talking about you. They're calling it the salute heard round the nation. Malik shook his head. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be anyone's symbol. I just wanted the truth to stand. Naomi closed her phone, her voice soft. Sometimes truth needs a face, and right now, that face is yours. Meanwhile, veterans groups doubled their support. American Legion posts across the country issued statements praising Malik's courage. Social media filled with photos of service members saluting their television screens as the clip replayed. A Vietnam veteran in Chicago told reporters, "That salute wasn't just for Turner, it was for all of us who've been dismissed when we came home." At a rally in Dallas, hundreds of veterans marched with signs that read, "Respect is duty." Television helicopters hovered overhead as chants of "Respect, respect" rolled through the streets. Inside Houston Police Headquarters, Officer Brent Harlan faced the storm he had created. Internal Affairs had launched a formal inquiry. Reporters camped outside the precinct doors. Harlan sat across from two investigators, his tie askew, sweat beading his forehead. "I followed procedure," he repeated for the third time. One investigator leaned forward. "Procedure doesn't include mocking a decorated veteran on the record. You escalated a situation that didn't exist." The world saw it. Harlan's jaw clenched. "They're turning him into a saint and me into a villain." The second investigator tapped the folder on the desk. "No, officer, you did that yourself." Judge Reyes, too, found herself pulled into the national spotlight. Interview requests flooded her chambers. Reporters wanted to know why she had saluted, what it meant, whether it was a political statement. Her clerk asked, "Should I start declining them?" Reyes sipped her tea, eyes steady. "Tell them I saluted a man who earned it, that's all. If people want to read more into it, that's their choice." Malik, trying to avoid cameras, decided to keep to himself. But when a group of local veterans invited him to speak at a community forum, Naomi convinced him to attend. "Dad, it's not a stage. It's not politics. It's just people like you who need to hear your voice." He finally agreed. That night, the auditorium filled with veterans, students, and families. When Malik walked on stage, the crowd rose to their feet. The applause rolled over him, unfamiliar and heavy. He raised a hand for quiet. "I'm not here for applause," he said. "I'm here to remind us what respect really means. It's not given by a gavel or a badge or even a salute. It's proven by how we treat each other. In the service, I learned that every life mattered. Every soldier, every medic, every kid we carried out of the dust. That doesn't stop when the uniform comes off." The audience erupted again, chants of "respect, respect" filling the room. Naomi sat in the front row, pride swelling in her chest. The next morning, Malik's words led the news cycle. Clips of his speech played alongside the courtroom footage. Editorials praised his dignity. Commentators debated what his story revealed about policing, justice, and respect. One anchor summed it up. Malik Turner didn't just defend himself in court, he reminded America what honor looks like. Across town, Harlan sat in his apartment, blinds drawn, television blaring with coverage of the rally. His name now appeared in headlines too, but never as the hero. His phone buzzed with messages from angry strangers. He hurled the phone onto the couch, muttering, "They'll move on, they always do." But even he knew, this time they might not. Back at home, Malik and Naomi sat on the porch as dusk settled. Fireflies winked in the humid air. Naomi broke the silence. "Do you realize what's happening? You've started something. People aren't just chanting your name, they're chanting the word itself. Respect." Malik exhaled, eyes on the horizon. "Then good. Let them carry it, because respect was never mine alone to hold." Above, the first stars blinked awake, steady and distant. For the first time in weeks, Malik allowed himself a small, tired smile. By the following week, Malik Turner could no longer walk through Houston without strangers stopping him. At gas stations, people reached for his hand. At grocery stores, veterans stood straighter when they saw his cane. Everywhere, the same word echoed: respect. Naomi tried to shield him from the noise, but it followed them home. The phone rang off the hook. Producers from New York, anchors from Washington, organizers from Los Angeles. Everyone wanted a piece of the man who reminded America what honor looks like. One evening, Naomi slid a folder across the kitchen table. "Dad, you've been invited to the Capitol. They want you to testify at a hearing on bias in policing. And after that, there's talk of an awards ceremony. The president might even want to meet you." Malik stared at the folder. His hand hovered above it but didn't open it. "Naomi, I didn't ask for this. I never wanted a stage." She looked at him gently. "Maybe you didn't want it, but maybe it wants you." At the same time, the storm around Officer Brent Harlan grew darker. Internal affairs leaked that disciplinary measures were coming. Protesters appeared outside his precinct with signs. "Fire Harlan now!" Harlan slammed his locker shut so hard the metal bent. Colleagues avoided his eyes. One younger officer muttered as he passed, "We don't need guys like you dragging us down." Harlan's face flushed. "I was doing my job." But the words sounded hollow, even to him. Judge Eleanor Reyes sat in her chambers, quietly sorting through a stack of letters. Some were from veterans thanking her for the salute. Others were from ordinary citizens who said the moment gave them hope. Her clerk leaned in. "Your Honor, the City Council is inviting you to speak. They want to commend your courage." Reyes shook her head. "I didn't salute for commendations. I saluted because it was right. Let Turner carry the message. My place is here, on the bench." Still, her eyes softened as she read one note from a high school student. "Thank you for showing us that respect still exists in this world." When Malik finally agreed to an interview, the network flew him and Naomi to New York. They arrived at a studio lit like an operating theater, cameras glinting, producers whispering in headsets. The anchor leaned forward, voice smooth. "Mr. Turner, millions have seen the salute. Millions more have heard your words about respect. What do you think this moment means?" Malik clasped his hands, his cane propped against the chair. "It means the word respect doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us. But we forget it too easily. If a salute reminded us, good. But let's remember without needing salutes." The anchor nodded. "Do you forgive Officer Harlan?" The studio fell silent. Naomi's eyes flicked nervously toward her father. Malik took a breath. "Forgiveness is possible, but accountability must come first. Respect without accountability is just a hollow word." The line ricocheted across screens before the broadcast even ended. Social media erupted. Newspapers plastered it on their front pages the next morning. Back in Houston, protesters painted the phrase on signs outside Harlan's precinct. "Respect without accountability is hollow." The chant rolled through the streets. Inside, Harlan raged. He punched his locker, denting it further. "They're crucifying me for one bad moment." Reeves, his longtime partner, looked at him coolly. "It wasn't one moment, Brent. It was a choice, and the whole country saw it." In Washington, congressional aides scrambled. Malik's words gave new momentum to long-stalled reform bills. Senators quoted him on the floor. One declared, "If respect without accountability is hollow, then our laws must carry both." The phrase became the headline on every major network. Meanwhile, Malik and Naomi sat in their hotel room exhausted. Naomi showed him the coverage on her phone. "Dad, do you see what's happening? You're not just a headline anymore. You're a voice people are listening to." Malik leaned back in his chair. "I never wanted to be a voice. I just wanted respect to mean something again." Naomi smiled faintly. "Then maybe you got exactly what you wanted." That night, Malik stood by the hotel window, gazing at the lights of New York. The city buzzed below, endless and loud. He pressed a hand to the glass, feeling the vibration of a world that suddenly wanted him to guide it. He whispered to himself, "Respect isn't mine to carry, but if I have to, I'll carry it long enough for others to take it." Behind him, Naomi's reflection appeared in the glass. "You already have," she said softly. For the first time in days, Malik allowed himself a small smile. The U.S. Capitol loomed pale against a bright winter sky as Malik Turner climbed its marble steps, cane clicking against stone. Naomi walked beside him, clutching a folder of notes he hadn't needed, but she insisted on carrying. Television crews crowded the plaza, reporters narrating live feeds. Today, Staff Sergeant Malik Turner, the veteran at the center of the courtroom salute, will testify before Congress on policing and respect. Inside, the committee room filled quickly. Lawmakers shuffled papers, aides whispered, cameras whirred. Rows of citizens packed the gallery, veterans in faded uniforms, students with notepads, families carrying quiet hope. When Malik entered, the room stilled. He took his seat at the witness table, set his cane against the chair, and raised his right hand to swear the oath. The chairman nodded. "Mr. Turner, thank you for joining us. Please share your story in your own words." Malik leaned toward the microphone. His voice was calm, deliberate. 2 weeks ago, I was arrested for standing on a sidewalk and asking an officer to check a young man's circulation. His hands were turning purple in the cuffs. I didn't cross-tape, I didn't raise my voice, I asked for dignity. For that, I was called aggressive, disrespectful, and obstructive. What I was, in truth, was a medic who couldn't stop being one. The room hushed. I served 12 years as a combat medic. I carried soldiers out of fire, held pressure on wounds, and prayed men back to life. Respect wasn't a slogan there, it was survival. We respected each other because without it, none of us would make it home. When I stood in that courtroom and heard an officer mock my service, I didn't expect a salute. I expected fairness. Judge Reyes gave me both. A congresswoman leaned forward. "Mr. Turner, what do you believe needs to change?" Malik's eyes were steady. "We can train tactics, but if we don't train respect, we've trained nothing. Respect isn't weakness, it's strength. Suspicion without respect breeds injustice. Respect without accountability is hollow. If we want both safety and dignity, we must demand both." Pens scratched across paper. Reporters typed furiously. The phrase replayed instantly on news tickers. Another lawmaker asked, "Do you forgive Officer Harlan?" Malik paused. "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. Accountability must come first. Forgiveness without accountability is empty. Respect requires both." The audience murmured in approval. Outside, crowds filled the Capitol steps, holding signs. "Respect is duty, accountability equals respect." Veterans saluted as the hearing streamed on giant screens. Chants rolled like thunder, "Respect, respect." Inside, Malik concluded, "I'm not here as a hero. Heroes are the ones who didn't come home. I'm here as a reminder. Respect isn't optional, it's essential. And if we let it slip, we don't just lose dignity, we lose everything built on it." Applause burst from the gallery, unusual but unstoppable. The chairman's gavel tapped once, but even he was smiling. "Thank you, Mr. Turner. You've given us much to consider." That evening, Malik and Naomi returned to their hotel. She flipped through headlines on her phone. Turner to Congress, respect is not optional. Veteran testifies, nation listens. She looked at him, pride in her eyes. "Dad, you realize what you just did? You gave them more than testimony. You gave them truth." Malik sat heavily, cane leaning against the wall. "Truth is heavy. I just hope they carry it." Naomi squeezed his hand. "They will. You're not carrying it alone anymore." Back in Houston, Officer Brent Harlan watched the hearing from his apartment. He saw Malik on the screen, calm and respected, his words echoing across the nation. Harlan's fists clenched. They made him a saint. They made me the villain. His phone buzzed with a message from Internal Affairs. "Hearing scheduled. Termination likely." He threw the phone across the room, but it didn't break the silence pressing in around him. Meanwhile, Judge Reyes sat in chambers watching the testimony replay. Her clerk asked, "Do you regret saluting, Your Honor?" Reyes shook her head. "Not for a second. Sometimes respect has to be visible. He earned it." Late that night, Malik stood by the hotel window. The Capitol dome glowed in the distance, steady as a lantern. He thought of the boy with purple hands, of comrades he'd carried through dust and fire, of the salute that had started all this. Naomi joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Dad," she whispered, "today you showed them who you are. Tomorrow, they'll show you what they've learned." Malik gazed at the dome. Let's hope they remember. The day after Malik Turner's testimony, the Capitol buzzed like it hadn't in years. Lawmakers from both parties were quoting his words in hallways, reporters clustered in marble corridors, and protesters outside refused to leave until they saw tangible action. On the front pages, one phrase dominated: "Respect without accountability is hollow." Editorial boards across the country demanded reforms. Commentators declared that Malik had done in one afternoon what commissions had failed to do in a decade: give the nation language simple enough to remember and strong enough to demand. Malik, meanwhile, sat quietly in his hotel room, cane leaned against the dresser, watching the chaos unfold on television. Naomi scrolled through her phone, eyes wide. "Dad, there are rallies everywhere. Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles, even overseas. People are chanting your words." Malik shook his head. "They're not my words anymore. They belong to them." In Houston, A crowd gathered on the courthouse steps where it all began. Veterans in faded jackets stood alongside high school students, pastors, and nurses. They carried candles and signs that read, "Respect is strength," and "Dignity first." One speaker, a Vietnam veteran with a weathered voice, told the crowd, "When Judge Reyes saluted Turner, she saluted all of us who've been overlooked. And when Turner spoke to Congress, he gave this nation a choice: respect or ruin." The crowd roared in agreement. Meanwhile, Officer Brent Harlan's world was collapsing. Internal Affairs had set a date for his termination hearing. Local news crews camped outside his apartment. Protesters chalked the word respect on the sidewalk in front of his building. Inside, Harlan paced, muttering, "It's not fair. One video, one salute, and I'm done." His partner Reeves visited once, standing stiff in the doorway. "It wasn't one moment, Brent. It was a pattern. People are finally seeing it." Harlan sneered. "So what? Turner's a saint now?" Reeves shook his head. "No, he's a man who earned respect. That's the difference." He turned and left, leaving Harlan alone with silence thicker than any punishment. Judge Eleanor Reyes also felt the ripple of Malik's testimony. She sat in chambers reading letters from across the country. Teachers wrote that they were using her salute in lessons on dignity. Veterans sent photos of themselves saluting their televisions. A mother wrote that her son wanted to join the army because respect still matters. Her clerk asked, "Do you think this will actually change anything?" Reyes closed a letter carefully. "Change is slow, but sometimes it needs a spark." Turner lit one. Back in Washington, lawmakers introduced a draft bill inspired by Malik's words. They called it the Respect and Accountability Act. It proposed stricter oversight for police misconduct, mandatory training on de-escalation and bias, and stronger protections for citizens recording public officials. During a press conference, one senator declared, "Staff Sergeant Turner's testimony reminded us that respect is not optional. If suspicion nearly cost a man his dignity, it can cost us our democracy. This law is our answer." Reporters shouted questions, cameras clicked, and the clip spread instantly across the airwaves. Malik tried to ignore it all. He spent his days walking the National Mall with Naomi, cane tapping against stone, pointing out memorials to men he'd once called brothers. At the Vietnam Wall, he rested a hand on the cold granite, lips moving in silent prayer. Naomi stood back, watching her father's shoulders heavy with memory. When he turned, his eyes were wet but steady. They carried respect when no one gave it to them. If the country remembers now, maybe it's because of them too. Naomi hugged him tight. "Then you're carrying them still." That night, they attended a candlelight vigil outside the Capitol. Thousands filled the lawn, candles flickering like stars. The crowd parted when they recognized Malik. He didn't want to speak, but the chants rose until he stepped forward. He raised his hand for quiet. "I'm not here for applause. I'm here as a reminder. Respect doesn't start in Congress. It starts here, between neighbors, in classrooms, on sidewalks. If we practice it every day, then laws won't just be words on paper. They'll be lives lived in dignity." The crowd roared, chants of "respect, respect," shaking the night air. Veterans saluted, students raised their candles higher, and Naomi stood proud, tears streaking her cheeks. Back at the hotel, Malik collapsed into a chair, exhausted. Naomi sat beside him, phone buzzing non-stop. "You realize this is bigger than you now, don't you?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Good, because I can't carry it much longer. Respect doesn't belong to me, it belongs to everyone who's chanting it tonight." He gazed out the window at the Capitol dome glowing against the sky. For the first time, he allowed himself a tired smile. And maybe that means it'll last. The flight home was quiet. Malik sat by the window, cane propped against his leg, watching clouds slide past. Naomi dozed against his shoulder, phone slipping from her hand. For the first time in weeks, there were no reporters, no chants, no gavel echoing in his ears, just the steady hum of engines. When the plane touched down, however, reality returned in force. At the gate, dozens of veterans waited in faded unit caps, saluting as Malik stepped through. Passengers clapped, some placing hands over their hearts. Naomi whispered, "Dad, they knew you'd be on this flight?" Malik nodded politely to each salute, but inside he felt the weight pressing again. He hadn't asked for parades. He just wanted peace. Outside the courthouse where it all began, crowds gathered again. This time, it wasn't for a trial but for a rally. Students carried banners, pastors led prayers, veterans stood at attention. On the steps, speakers invoked his name alongside the phrase that had spread like wildfire. Respect without accountability is hollow. Naomi tugged his sleeve. They want you to say something. Malik hesitated, then stepped forward. Cane steady on the stone. You don't need me to lead you, he said. Respect isn't mine to give or take. It's yours to practice. If you carry it forward, then I can rest. The crowd erupted in chants of, "Respect! Respect!" Veterans saluted, students raised fists, and Malik stepped back into the shadows, content to let the word echo without him. At the same time, Officer Brent Harlan faced his disciplinary hearing. The police board convened in a sterile conference room, cameras banned but tension thick. Harlan sat stiff in his chair, tie loose, eyes hollow. The chairwoman spoke first. Officer Harlan, you are charged with conduct unbecoming, violation of civil rights, and bringing disrepute to this department. Do you wish to respond? Harlan's voice cracked. I was doing my job. He escalated. The board interrupted with a replay of the body cam footage. Malik's calm voice, the boy's purple hands, Harlan's mocking laugh. What are you, a doctor now? The room was silent when the clip ended. The chairwoman leaned forward. Staff Sergeant Turner was a medic. He saved lives while you mocked him, and you put this department on trial before the entire nation. Effective immediately, you are terminated. Harlan's face flushed. He gripped the table as if it could keep him from sinking, but nothing could stop the collapse. News of Harlan's firing spread quickly. Crowds outside the precinct cheered when the announcement was made. Reporters flashed headlines. Officer terminated after courtroom salute. Fallout. Protesters carried signs. Accountability equals respect. Inside his apartment, Harlan sat in darkness, blinds closed, television replaying Malik's testimony on loop. He whispered to himself, they erased me. They made him everything. But deep down, he knew he hadn't been erased. He had erased himself the moment he chose ridicule over dignity. Judge Eleanor Reyes, watching from her chambers, heard the news of Harlan's termination. Her clerk asked, do you think justice was done? Reyes sighed. Justice is more than a firing, but accountability is a start. Respect needs it, or else it's just a hollow word. For Malik, the days that followed were a blur of interviews, phone calls, and community meetings. He turned down most requests, choosing instead to visit local schools and veteran halls. At one school, a student asked, Mr. Turner, what does respect mean to you? Malik knelt to meet the boy's eyes. It means seeing someone's worth before you see their mistakes. It means treating dignity as the starting point, not the reward. The boy nodded solemnly. Teachers wiped quiet tears. Naomi watched her father carefully, worried about the toll. Dad, you don't have to carry all of this. Let others take it now. Malik smiled faintly. I know, and I see them doing it. That's the only reason I keep going, because respect is walking on its own now. One evening, he returned to the courthouse alone. The steps were empty, the plaza quiet under a soft evening sky. He leaned on his cane and looked up at the stone facade where everything had begun. In the silence, he heard echoes, not of jeers or insults, but of the judge's steady voice, the crowd's chants, the salute that had changed everything. He whispered to himself, respect stood here once, let it stand again. Then he turned and walked home, cane tapping like a steady drumbeat, each step lighter than the last. The story no longer belonged to Houston. Within weeks of Malik Turner's testimony, the word respect leapt beyond American headlines and into international ones. In London, newspapers ran the photo of Judge Reyes's salute under the headline, Dignity in the Dock. In Paris, protesters marched with signs declaring respect et responsabilité. In Nairobi, murals of Malik with his cane appeared alongside the words, Respect is strength. Malik sat in his living room watching a world he barely recognized. Naomi scrolled on her phone, excitement spilling from her voice. Dad, look at this. Tokyo students staged a silent protest with placards that said, Respect first. And in Rio, they sang your line into carnival songs. Malik rubbed his forehead. I never asked to be global. Naomi smiled gently. Maybe that's why it works. Because you weren't chasing it. At NASA's Houston campus, where Malik still volunteered occasionally, colleagues greeted him with nods of quiet pride. Engineers had posted his words on the whiteboard in the break room. Respect without accountability is hollow. Maya Ortiz clapped him on the back. You know, Turner, you've become more than a medic. You've become a patch for a whole country's system. He chuckled softly. Patches don't last forever. Someone has to build the real fix. Maya smiled. Maybe that's what this movement is. The fix. Meanwhile, Officer Brent Harlan discovered what it meant to live without the shield of a badge. Terminated, disgraced, and unemployed, he wandered Houston's streets like a ghost. Former colleagues crossed the street to avoid him. Neighbors whispered behind curtains. At a grocery store, a clerk refused his card. "We don't serve men who mock heroes," she said. Harlan slammed the door on his way out, shame curdling in his chest. For the first time, the anger gave way to silence. Sitting alone in his apartment, he admitted aloud, "I did this to myself." Back at the courthouse, Judge Reyes continued her work with steady resolve. But letters poured in daily. Thank you notes from veterans, sketches from children, even invitations from foreign dignitaries. Her clerk asked one afternoon, "Do you realize your salute is being taught in civics classes now?" Reyes sighed, setting aside a case file. "I didn't salute for civics. I saluted for respect. If it teaches them something, then good. But the real test is whether they practice it when no one's watching." The Respect Act, meanwhile, advanced in Congress. Malik's testimony was quoted in every debate. One senator declared, "Staff Sergeant Turner reminded us that dignity is not optional. This bill is our chance to prove it." The chamber erupted in applause. Watching from Houston, Malik shook his head. "I didn't write their laws. I just told the truth." Naomi touched his arm, and the truth pushed them to write. That weekend, Malik agreed to attend a veterans rally downtown. The crowd filled the plaza, flags snapping in the wind, chants of "respect, respect" rolling like thunder. When Malik stepped onto the stage, silence fell. He leaned on his cane, scanning the faces. "I've heard people call me a hero. I'm not. Heroes are the ones who didn't make it home. I'm just a man who refused to let another boy's hands go numb. If that act reminded us of dignity, then let's not stop here. Respect must outlive us all." The crowd roared, some saluting, others raising fists. Naomi stood at the edge of the stage, tears in her eyes, proud of the man the world had finally seen. Across the city, Harlan heard the echoes of that same rally through his apartment window. The chants of respect were everywhere now, in the streets, on television, in classrooms. He sat on his couch, staring at his tarnished badge. He whispered, "I thought the badge gave me respect, but it was never mine. And now I've lost both." For the first time, tears cut tracks down his face. That evening, Malik returned home exhausted. He and Naomi sat on the porch sipping tea as twilight deepened. Fireflies blinked across the yard and the hum of the city faded into a soft chorus. Naomi broke the silence. "Dad, do you realize what you've done? You've turned a courtroom insult into a movement the world is carrying." Malik exhaled. "Good, because I can't carry it much longer. Respect has to walk on its own." He looked up at the stars, steady above Houston's haze, and maybe, just maybe, it will. Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder. "It already is." By the 10th week since the courtroom salute, Malik Turner was no longer just a man with a cane. He was a symbol, a role he had never applied for and one he wished sometimes he could resign from. Everywhere he went, people wanted a piece of him. At the gas station, strangers snapped photos. At the grocery store, shoppers stopped him in the aisles to thank him. Even on quiet morning walks, children pointed, "That's him, Mama, the man from the salute." Naomi noticed the strain in his eyes. "Dad, you don't have to answer every call. You don't have to speak at every rally. Respect will survive without you." Malik sank into his porch chair, cane resting across his lap. "But what if it doesn't? What if all this fades the moment I step back?" Naomi shook her head. "You've already lit the fire. It doesn't need you to hold the match forever." In Washington, the Respect Act moved steadily through committees. Lawmakers invoked Malik's name constantly. Editorials praised his testimony as a turning point in the national conscience. Across the country, communities held their own forums on dignity and accountability. Teachers wrote his words on chalkboards. Malik saw it all on television but refused to let it swell his pride. "They don't need my face plastered everywhere," he muttered to Naomi. "They need to remember the lesson, not the man." Meanwhile, Officer Brent Harlan's decline deepened. His firing was official, his appeals rejected. Protesters still chalked respect across the sidewalk near his apartment. Neighbors turned away when he passed. One evening, he packed a duffel bag with the few belongings that mattered: an old photo of his academy graduation, his father's watch, and the badge he no longer had the right to wear. He stood at the window staring at Houston's skyline. "They've taken the city from me," he whispered. Then, after a pause, No, I gave it away. For the first time, he considered leaving Houston altogether. Back at NASA, Malik found a rare refuge. The hum of machines, the glow of telemetry screens, the quiet rhythm of engineers at work. It was the one place he wasn't a symbol, just another set of steady hands. Maya Ortiz stopped by his workstation. You know, Turner, you're not fooling anyone. You come here to hide from the spotlight. Malik smirked. Is that a problem? Not for me, Maya said, leaning against the console. But sooner or later you'll have to decide. Are you going to keep running from the symbol, or are you going to shape it? Malik shook his head. Symbols don't belong to the people they're made from. They belong to everyone else. I just want to go back to being a man who fixes problems quietly. Maya studied him. Maybe you can be both. That weekend, Malik reluctantly agreed to attend another rally. This one organized by veterans in Houston. Naomi insisted. It's different this time. They don't want to honor you. They want to honor what you reminded them of. The plaza overflowed. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with students, nurses, and teachers. When Malik stepped onto the stage, the chants of respect, respect shook the ground. He raised his hand for quiet. I don't need your applause, he said, voice firm. What I need is for you to carry this word when no one's watching. Respect isn't about me or even about today. It's about tomorrow. When the cameras are gone, when the crowds are home. Will you still practice it then? The response was thunderous. The chant rolled again, not his name, but the word itself. Respect. Naomi watched from the side, pride and worry mingling in her eyes. She knew the speech would echo across headlines, but she also saw the toll on her father's shoulders. Later that night, Malik returned home and sank heavily into his porch chair. Naomi joined him with 2 mugs of tea. Dad, you're tired, I can see it. He nodded slowly. Respect is walking on its own now. Maybe I need to learn how to let go. Naomi rested her head against his arm. You don't have to carry it forever. You just have to trust the world to carry it next. Malik looked up at the stars. The sky was steady, quiet, infinite. Then maybe it's time, he whispered. Across town, Harlan loaded his duffel bag into the trunk of his car. He stood for a long moment, staring at the word respect scrawled in chalk across the sidewalk. His throat tightened. He muttered, maybe leaving is the only respect I've got left to give. He slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled into the night, uncertain of where he was going, but certain that Houston was no longer his home. The morning after the rally, Malik Turner woke to silence, a rare gift. No reporters at the door, no phone buzzing with demands, just the soft hum of the fridge and the warmth of sunlight bleeding through the blinds. For the first time in months, he felt like himself again. Not a symbol, not a headline, just a man sitting at his own kitchen table. Naomi placed a mug of coffee in front of him. Dad, I've been thinking, she said carefully. Maybe it's time you take a step back. You've carried this long enough. The word belongs to the people now. Malik sipped slowly. I know, but stepping back feels like abandoning them. Naomi shook her head. It's not abandonment, it's trust. Trust that respect doesn't need you in front of cameras to survive. You've given them more than enough. Malik looked at his daughter, steady and certain. In her eyes, he saw the truth. Respect wasn't going anywhere, even if he disappeared from the headlines. At NASA later that week, Malik found himself at peace in the familiar hum of control rooms. Screens displayed data from satellites spinning silently above the Earth. For hours, no one asked him for a speech, no one shoved a microphone in his face. He was simply an engineer again. Maya Ortiz joined him at a console, leaning against the desk. You know, Turner, it suits you. This quiet. The world may see you as a symbol, but we still see you as one of us. Malik smiled faintly. That's all I've ever wanted. To just do the work. Maya studied him. Then do it. Let the world handle the rest. Meanwhile, the Respect Act surged toward passage. On the Senate floor, lawmakers quoted Malik's testimony almost word for word. One senator declared, if a combat medic can remind us that respect without accountability is hollow, then surely we can codify that truth into law. The gallery erupted in applause. Outside, protesters held candles and signs. Hashtags trended again, keeping pressure high. In Houston, Naomi watched coverage on television. Dad, they're about to vote. Do you realize? You started this. Malik shook his head gently. No, the people did. I just lit the spark. Far from Washington, Brent Harlan drove through back roads with no destination. His duffel bag sat in the passenger seat, badge rattling in the glove compartment. Every gas station TV replayed Malik's speeches. Every diner radio carried chants of respect. One night, he stopped at a motel outside Dallas. In the lobby, the clerk eyed him carefully, then looked at the news on the screen. Malik addressing veterans. The clerk said softly, "You're that officer, aren't you?" Harlan froze. The clerk shook his head, sliding the key across. "Respect, man. You should have learned it sooner." Harlan took the key without a word, shame burning deep. Back in Houston, Malik attended a small gathering at a community center. No cameras, no chants, just families and neighbors. He spoke plainly, without flourish. "Respect isn't extraordinary," he said. "It's ordinary. It's how we talk to each other in grocery lines, how we listen when someone says they're hurting. If we only shout it at rallies, it fades. If we practice it here, every day, it lasts." The crowd nodded, quiet but moved. A teacher approached him afterward, saying, "That's the lesson they'll remember most. Not the speeches, not the laws, the everyday respect." That night, Malik sat on his porch with Naomi, cicadas humming in the dark. "Do you think I've done enough?" he asked. Naomi leaned against him. "You've done more than enough. Now let others carry it." Malik gazed at the stars, silent satellites tracing their paths above. "Then maybe it's time I finally rest." Meanwhile, in Washington, the Respect Act cleared the Senate by a narrow margin. The chamber erupted in applause, and outside, crowds chanted the word until it shook the marble steps. Commentators called it the Turner effect, though Malik himself wanted no credit. Watching the vote from his living room, Malik whispered to himself, "Respect stood." Naomi squeezed his hand. "And so did you." Across the state line, Harlan sat in his car at a rest stop, watching the same coverage on a flickering TV through a diner window. The cheers for Malik, the headlines celebrating respect, it was all inescapable. He buried his face in his hands and whispered, "I mocked a man's dignity, and it cost me mine." For the first time, his voice cracked not with anger, but with regret. The Respect Act had been signed into law only 2 weeks earlier, but its effects were already rippling outward. In Houston, Malik Turner walked slowly with his cane through a neighborhood that once looked at him as just another quiet veteran. Now, murals of his silhouette adorned brick walls. A man with a cane standing tall, the word respect painted in bold beneath. Naomi walked beside him, pointing. "Dad, they're teaching about the act in schools now. 4th graders stood and recited your words. Respect without accountability is hollow, like a pledge." Malik shook his head softly. "They shouldn't remember my words. They should remember the meaning." A teacher overheard as she ushered children out of a classroom. She smiled. "Don't worry, Mr. Turner, they understand. They're learning that respect isn't about fame. It's about how they treat the person next to them." Malik nodded, relief flickering in his chest. At the community center that evening, locals gathered for the first Respect Forum under the new law. Families shared stories of unfair treatment, officers attended in plain clothes, and veterans stood as reminders of service. Malik sat quietly in the back, cane across his knees, listening more than speaking. A young officer raised his hand nervously. "I joined the force last year. I saw what happened in that courtroom. I don't want to be like that. I want to be better." Malik leaned forward, voice steady. "Then remember this. Authority without respect collapses. Respect doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger." The room applauded softly, not for spectacle, but for truth. Meanwhile, Judge Eleanor Reyes faced her own wave of attention. Schools invited her to speak, organizations wanted her at ceremonies. She declined most of them. Sitting in chambers, she told her clerk, "I saluted because it was right, not because I wanted fame. Turner carries the message. I'll keep carrying justice here." Her clerk asked, "Do you think he can handle being a symbol forever?" Reyes paused. "No one can. That's why respect has to live beyond symbols." Across state lines, Brent Harlan drifted further from the man he once was. He had no badge, no uniform, no anchor. He stayed in motels, paid in cash, kept to himself. Everywhere he went, televisions replayed Malik's testimony, his words plastered on screens. The world refused to let Harlan forget. One night in Oklahoma, he sat at a diner counter. A veteran in a ball cap slid onto the stool beside him, glancing at the television where Malik's face appeared again. The veteran said quietly, "That man's got dignity. Reminds me of my old sergeant. Harlan stiffened. The veteran caught his look. Recognition flickered. You're the cop, aren't you? The one who mocked him. Harlan looked down at his coffee. For the first time, he didn't argue. He just whispered, "Yeah." The veteran shook his head. Then you've got two choices. Keep running from it or face it. Respect doesn't chase cowards. It waits for men who can admit they were wrong. The words followed Harlan long after he left the diner. Back in Houston, Malik tried to retreat into ordinary life. He returned to volunteering at NASA, helping troubleshoot minor glitches with satellites. The rhythm of code soothed him. Here, no one asked him for speeches. No cameras intruded. Maya Ortiz leaned against the console. Feels good, doesn't it, to just be an engineer again? Malik smiled faintly. Better than being a symbol. Maya raised an eyebrow. But maybe you're both. And maybe that's okay, as long as you remember the man comes before the symbol. That weekend, Malik and Naomi attended a neighborhood vigil. No cameras, no reporters, just candles flickering in paper cups. Families held hands, children sang softly, veterans saluted in silence. A pastor spoke. Respect doesn't end with a law, it begins with us, every day. Let Turner's story remind us, but let our actions prove it. As the crowd bowed their heads, Malik felt peace settle deeper than any headline could give. Respect was alive here, ordinary and unremarkable, exactly where it belonged. Later that night, Malik sat on his porch, stars faint above the city haze. Naomi leaned against him. "Dad, do you think this will last?" she asked. Malik gazed upward, cane resting by his side. Satellites drift if no one corrects them. People do too. But if enough of us keep adjusting, keep practicing respect, then maybe this time it'll hold. Naomi smiled softly. Then maybe you've done your part. Malik closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. Maybe. Far away in a dark motel room, Brent Harlan sat on the edge of his bed, badge in his hands. For the first time, he whispered aloud, "I disrespected a man who gave more than I ever have. And now I have nothing." His voice cracked, but the silence afterward felt different. Not anger, not denial, but the first fragile thread of accountability. The Respect Act had been law for just over a month when Houston held its first public forum under the new mandate. The auditorium at City Hall filled quickly. Officers, community leaders, teachers, veterans, and students all packed the seats. Television crews lined the back wall, cameras ready to broadcast the city's first official step into what many were calling the era of accountability. Malik Turner sat in the front row beside Naomi, cane across his lap. He'd tried to decline the invitation, but the mayor insisted. "Sergeant Turner," the letter had read, "your presence matters, not as a symbol, but as a witness." Naomi leaned close. "Dad, this is history. They're making changes right here, because of you." Malik shook his head. "Not because of me, because of what respect demanded." The meeting began with a presentation from the police chief. Behind him, slides showed new training modules on de-escalation, mandatory medical awareness for officers, and policies protecting citizens who recorded public interactions. The chief cleared his throat. "Respect is no longer a suggestion in this department. It is policy. Officers will be evaluated not only on performance but on dignity." A ripple moved through the room. Some officers shifted uneasily. Others nodded. Malik felt Naomi squeeze his hand. "You see, it's starting." When the floor opened for public comment, a mother stood, holding her son's hand. "Last year, my boy was stopped on his way home from school. He was scared and I was too. If this law means he'll be treated with respect, then maybe I can breathe easier." The crowd applauded softly. Malik closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the boy whose purple hands had started it all. Meanwhile, far from the auditorium, Brent Harlan parked his car outside a small Houston church. He hadn't been back in the city since his firing, but something had pulled him here. For weeks he'd run from his shame, but the veteran's words in that Oklahoma diner still echoed. Respect doesn't chase cowards. It waits for men who can admit they were wrong. He sat in the car for a long time, badge in his palm. Finally, he stepped inside. The church was empty, save for the pastor arranging hymnals. The pastor looked up, startled. "Can I help you?" Harlan swallowed hard. "I think I need to start making things right." Back at City Hall, the mayor closed the forum with a statement. "Tonight, Houston leads by example. We are the first city to implement the Respect Act, but we will not be the last. Let this be the beginning of a culture where dignity is non-negotiable." Applause filled the hall. Cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed Malik as he tried to leave. "Sergeant Turner, what do you think of the reforms?" He paused, cane planted firmly. "Reforms are words. What matters is practice. Respect has to be lived on sidewalks, in schools, in patrol cars, not just on paper." The clip aired that night across national networks. Commentators praised his humility, noting that even at the center of change, he refused to take credit. Later at home, Naomi sat across from Malik at the kitchen table. "Dad, people are saying you should run for office, that you could lead this movement formally." Malik laughed quietly, shaking his head. "I spent my life patching wounds, not writing laws. My role was to remind, not to rule." Naomi smiled. "Then you've reminded them well." Across town, Harlan sat in a church pew long after the pastor left. The badge lay heavy in his palm. For the first time, he prayed. Not for his career, not for revenge, but for the courage to admit his failure. "God," he whispered, "I mocked a man who lived what I only pretended to. I disrespected someone who deserved honor. Show me how to make this right." Tears blurred his vision, but in that moment, he felt the first real step toward change. Meanwhile, Judge Eleanor Reyes returned home from a long day on the bench. She poured tea and sat with a stack of letters from across the nation. One, from a teacher in Seattle, read, "My students salute each other at the start of class now, not as soldiers but as citizens. Your gesture reminded them that respect belongs to everyone." Reyes smiled faintly, whispering to herself, then maybe the salute was worth the storm. That evening, Malik sat on his porch, cane leaning against the railing. Naomi joined him, her eyes shining. "Dad, today was proof. Respect is walking on its own." He nodded, watching the stars prick through the night sky. "Then maybe I can finally lay it down." Naomi rested her head against his shoulder. "Not lay it down. Pass it on." Malik exhaled slowly, peace settling in his chest. Respect was no longer his burden. It was everyone's. A week after Houston's first Respect Forum, Malik Turner decided to walk the neighborhood alone. His cane tapped steadily on the pavement as he passed storefronts and schools. For months, people had looked at him like a symbol. Today, they treated him like something different, an ordinary neighbor who reminded them of something they already carried. At a corner store, he held the door open for a young officer in uniform. The officer nodded, almost sheepish. "Mr. Turner, I read your testimony. We just had our first respect training at the academy. They showed your video." Malik studied him for a moment, then offered his hand. "Then carry it forward. Make it practice, not a lecture." The officer's handshake was firm. "I will, sir." As the young man walked away, Malik felt a flicker of hope. Respect wasn't just policy, it was beginning to take root in ordinary moments. At a nearby school, Naomi volunteered to speak about the new act. Malik sat quietly in the back as children asked questions. One girl raised her hand. "Does respect mean we always agree?" Naomi smiled. "No, it means we value each other even when we don't. Respect is what keeps disagreement from turning into destruction." A boy piped up. "Like when Mr. Turner told the officer to check the cuffs?" Naomi glanced back at her father, pride shining in her eyes. "Exactly. Respect is making sure no one's hands go numb, literally or figuratively." The class clapped, their voices bright with understanding. Meanwhile, Judge Eleanor Reyes continued to preside in her courtroom. She noticed small shifts since the salute. Officers stood straighter. Lawyers used more measured tones. Even defendants seemed to carry themselves differently. Her clerk whispered during a recess, "Do you think one moment can really change so much?" Reyes sipped her tea. "Moments don't change the world. They remind the world to change itself." Across town, Brent Harlan took his first public step toward accountability. He walked into a veteran support group, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, eyes downcast. Conversation stilled when he entered. Some recognized him instantly. The facilitator, a Marine veteran, raised an eyebrow. "We don't usually get cops here." Harlan swallowed hard. "I'm not a cop anymore. I came because I disrespected one of you, a man who deserved honor. I've lost my badge, my career, and most of my dignity. But I don't want to keep running. I want to listen." The room was silent. Then one veteran spoke quietly. "Respect starts with admitting where you failed. You've done that. Now prove it." For the first time, Harlan didn't feel chased. He felt challenged. Back in Malik's neighborhood, a local cafe displayed a chalkboard with daily quotes. That morning, the barista had written, "Respect without accountability is hollow." Customers nodded as they ordered their coffee, repeating the words as if they were part of everyday language now. Malik watched from his corner table, amused. "When did my testimony become a cafe motto?" Naomi grinned. "When respect became a lifestyle." That evening, Houston held its second Respect Forum. This time, Malik sat further back, determined to let others lead. A young teacher took the stage. "Respect isn't about Sergeant Turner anymore, it's about us. Every time we practice it, in classrooms, in streets, in homes, we prove his reminder was worth it." The applause swelled. Malik felt no need to speak. The message was alive without him. After the forum, Malik walked home under a sky freckled with stars. Naomi matched his pace, Kane tapping beside them. "Dad," she said softly, "do you feel it? It's not your burden anymore. Respect belongs to everyone now." Malik exhaled, shoulders lighter. Then maybe justice finally stood. Not because of me, but because of all of us. Across town, Harlan sat in the veterans' circle again. This time he listened. He heard stories of men who had carried each other through fire, of women who demanded dignity in the face of loss. He didn't speak much, but when he left, he whispered to himself, "Respect waited for me, now I have to prove I deserve it." For the first time in months, he didn't feel like running. Judge Reyes, writing in her journal late that night, summed it best. "Respect, once visible, refuses to vanish. The salute may fade in memory, but its echo is in the way people now look at one another." On his porch, Malik leaned back, Naomi beside him, fireflies sparking in the yard. The world was still noisy, still imperfect, still unfinished, but in the quiet of that night, he felt peace. Respect was no longer a word he had to defend. It was a word his city was learning to live. The real test of the Respect Act came on a humid Thursday evening, in a neighborhood still carrying scars from old mistrust. A call went out about a shoplifting incident at a corner market. By the time officers arrived, a crowd had already gathered, phones raised, wary eyes watching. Malik Turner happened to be nearby, cane tapping against cracked pavement as he walked home from the community center. He saw the flashing lights, the tension vibrating in the air, the way parents pulled children close. He knew this feeling, fear wrapped in silence, waiting to explode. Two officers stood with a teenage boy in a hoodie, hands trembling at his sides. The store owner shouted accusations while the crowd muttered. Phones recorded every second. One officer, young and new to the force, glanced nervously at his partner. "What do we do?" His partner breathed steady. "We follow the new protocol." He turned to the crowd, voice clear. "We're here to resolve this with respect. We will review the footage, speak with the store owner, and ensure this young man is treated fairly. No one will be disrespected tonight." The words rippled through the crowd. The tension eased, not gone, but softened. Malik watched quietly, heart steady. The Respect Act was being tested in real time, not on paper, but on pavement. And it was holding. Later that night, videos of the incident spread online. Instead of violence or arrest, the footage showed officers calmly speaking, checking evidence, and releasing the boy after confirming he had paid. The crowd dispersed peacefully, some applauding. Headlines the next morning read, "Respect Act in action. Tense scene resolved without incident." Naomi scrolled through her phone at breakfast. "Dad, look at this. People are calling it the Turner test." Malik shook his head, sipping coffee. "It wasn't my test, it was theirs. And they passed." Naomi smiled. "That's exactly why they call it that." Across town, Judge Eleanor Reyes read the same headlines in her chambers. She allowed herself a small smile. "So it lives," she murmured. Her clerk nodded. "It's becoming more than a moment. It's becoming normal." Meanwhile, Brent Harlan sat in the back row of a veterans meeting, listening intently. This time, he didn't shrink when people recognized him. Instead, he stood when invited and spoke for the first time. "I was the officer in that courtroom," he admitted, voice rough. "I mocked a man who deserved honor. I disrespected the uniform, his service, and myself. I can't undo it, but I can own it, and I can learn." The room was silent. Then an older veteran said, "Owning it is the first step, now live it." Harlan nodded, tears in his eyes. "I will." At the community center that weekend, Malik was asked to reflect on the shoplifting incident. He stood before a modest crowd, cane steady in his hand. "What we saw wasn't perfection," he said. It was practice. Respect isn't a switch you flip, it's a muscle you build. Those officers chose respect when suspicion could have ruled them. That choice is what keeps communities whole. The audience applauded. A mother raised her hand. Do you think it will last, Mr. Turner? Malik met her eyes. Only if we keep choosing it. Laws can open doors, but people have to walk through them. Later, sitting on his porch with Naomi, Malik reflected aloud. Maybe this is what I needed to see. Not speeches, not rallies, just ordinary respect on an ordinary street. Naomi leaned her head against his arm. Then maybe you can finally rest, knowing the world is carrying it. Malik looked up at the stars, brighter than usual through the haze. Maybe, he whispered. Across Houston, conversation shifted. Parents told children about the new act. Officers spoke of dignity during roll call. Teachers encouraged students to record kindness as well as conflict. The word respect was no longer a slogan. It was a practice being tested, one street at a time. And for Malik Turner, that was the proof he needed. Malik Turner had tried to decline the invitation 3 times. The city wanted to honor him at the annual Veterans Day ceremony, presenting him with a medal for his extraordinary contribution to justice and dignity. Each time he said, I didn't do anything extraordinary, I just told the truth. But Naomi finally convinced him. Dad, this isn't about you wanting the spotlight. It's about people needing a symbol. Sometimes symbols help us remember what matters. So on a cool November morning, Malik stood at the front of the plaza, cane planted firm, the American flag snapping overhead. Rows of veterans filled the seats, uniforms from different wars and decades blending together like a living timeline. Families waved flags. Reporters clustered at the edges, cameras poised. The mayor stepped to the podium. Today we honor Staff Sergeant Malik Turner, not just for his service on battlefields abroad, but for his service here at home. When dignity was dismissed, he stood. When respect was mocked, he reminded us what it means. And because of him, this city and this country are walking a new path. Applause swept the plaza. Veterans saluted. The mayor turned, pinning the medal to Malik's lapel. Malik bowed his head slightly, but when he stepped to the microphone, his words were plain. I accept this not for myself, but for every soldier I carried off the field, and for every neighbor who chooses respect when it's hardest. Heroes aren't on this stage. They're the ones who didn't make it home. If you want to honor me, honor them. And more than that, honor each other. The crowd rose to its feet, chants of respect, respect, rolling across the plaza like thunder. Watching from the edge, Judge Eleanor Reyes felt a swell of quiet pride. She had started all this with one salute, a gesture she thought would end in the walls of her courtroom. Now it echoed across the city. She whispered to herself, and still it was the right thing. Across town, Brent Harlan listened to the coverage on a small radio while painting walls at a community shelter. After weeks of veterans meetings, he had begun volunteering here quietly, scrubbing graffiti, serving meals, repairing broken chairs. The shelter director, a wiry man with gray hair, clapped him on the shoulder. Didn't think you'd last more than a week, but you keep showing up. Harlan wiped sweat from his brow. I spent years taking respect for granted. Maybe I need to spend the rest of my life learning how to earn it. The director nodded. That's the right place to start. Back at the ceremony, a young cadet approached Malik after the crowd dispersed. Sergeant Turner, sir, I'm joining the Army next spring. People tell me respect is old-fashioned, but you proved it isn't. Thank you. Malik clasped his shoulder. Respect will never be old-fashioned. Carry it with you. It'll weigh more than a weapon, but it'll save more lives too. The cadet's eyes shone as he saluted. Malik returned the gesture, then turned back to Naomi. Exhaustion etched across his face. You were right, he said softly. Sometimes symbols matter. Naomi smiled. And sometimes the man behind them matters more. That evening, Malik sat on his porch, medal resting on the table beside him. He traced its edge with his finger, then shook his head. This belongs to all of them, not me. Naomi leaned against the railing. Maybe, but it also belongs to you, because you reminded us. Malik gazed at the stars, steady above the quiet city. Then let it be a reminder, not of me, but of what respect costs and why it matters. Across Houston, the Respect Act continued to ripple into daily life. Officers now carried medical cards in their patrol kits, teaching them to recognize circulation issues. Schools added respect practices to morning routines. Community boards held monthly forums where neighbors and officers sat side by side. And in a small shelter downtown, Brent Harlan served soup to a line of men who had nothing but the clothes on their backs. One of them, a veteran, paused when he recognized him. "You're that cop," the man said. Harlan nodded, shame plain in his eyes. "Yeah. I disrespected a veteran who deserved better." The man studied him, then took the bowl. "Then earn it back. One bowl at a time." Harlan exhaled, nodding. "That's the plan." By nightfall, Malik's medal lay in its box, tucked away on a shelf. He didn't need it as proof. Proof was in the steady handshake of a young officer, in the voices of children learning the word in classrooms, in the quiet of neighborhoods no longer holding their breath when sirens wailed. Respect was no longer a fragile spark. It was a steady flame, and for the first time, Malik believed it would keep burning without him. The respect forums had become monthly staples in Houston. Schools, churches, and community centers all hosted their own versions, where neighbors gathered with officers, veterans, and city leaders to share stories. It wasn't flashy. No cameras, no national headlines, just ordinary people practicing accountability in ordinary rooms. Malik Turner often attended quietly, cane resting against his chair, listening rather than speaking. For him, the true measure of success was that the movement no longer needed him at the microphone. Tonight, the forum was packed into a church basement, folding chairs lined wall to wall. The moderator announced, "We welcome anyone who wants to share, citizens, officers, veterans alike." A young woman stood first, describing how a recent traffic stop ended with calm conversation instead of confrontation. A teacher followed, speaking about students who now reminded each other to practice respect. Applause echoed gently after each voice. Then a ripple moved through the room as a man rose slowly from the back row. Broad-shouldered, eyes downcast, a familiar face many had only seen on the news. Brent Harlan. The air tightened. Murmurs swept the crowd. Some shifted in their seats. Malik's gaze sharpened, his hand tightening slightly on his cane. The moderator cleared his throat. "Mr. Harlan, you wish to speak?" Harlan nodded, voice low but steady. "Yes, if you'll let me." He walked to the front, every step heavy. For a long moment he stood behind the microphone in silence, scanning the faces before him. Faces that once saw him as authority, now as a cautionary tale. "I was the officer in that courtroom," he began, voice rough. "The one who mocked Staff Sergeant Turner. The one who thought respect came with a badge instead of how you treated people. And because of that, I lost everything. My badge, my job, my dignity." The room was still. "I spent months running from it. Blaming the world, blaming the cameras, blaming him." He gestured faintly toward Malik. "But the truth is, I mocked a man who had carried soldiers out of fire while I carried nothing but arrogance. I disrespected a veteran, a citizen, and myself." Gasps and murmurs stirred, but Harlan pressed on. "I'm not asking for forgiveness tonight. Forgiveness without accountability is hollow. He taught me that. I'm asking for a chance to keep showing up, to learn, to earn back one day at a time what I threw away in one moment." His voice cracked. "I don't expect applause. I don't deserve it. But I needed to say this where it mattered, in front of the people I disrespected most." The silence stretched. Then slowly, a veteran in the second row stood and said, "Owning it is the first step. Respect isn't words, it's practice. Keep practicing." A teacher added, "Respect grows when we admit our failures. You've admitted yours, now prove it." The room filled with nods, not cheers, an acknowledgement that accountability had begun, fragile but real. From his chair, Malik studied Harlan. He saw not the smirk from the courtroom, but a man stripped of illusions, standing in the raw light of truth. Malik's grip on his cane eased. When the moderator asked if Malik wished to respond, he rose slowly. The room hushed. "I won't deny the damage done," Malik said, voice even. "But tonight, I see a man choosing respect for the first time. That doesn't erase the past, but it shapes the future. If you're willing to walk this road, then walk it. Respect isn't mine to give or take, it's yours to live." He lowered himself back into his chair. The crowd murmured agreement. After the forum, people clustered around Harlan, not with praise, but with guarded openness. Some offered advice. Others told him bluntly he had years to prove himself. He nodded to each, taking their words without defense. As the room emptied, Harlan approached Malik slowly. "Sergeant Turner, thank you for not shutting me down." I don't deserve your respect. Malik met his eyes. Respect isn't a gift, it's a choice. Start choosing it every day. Maybe in time you'll find it again. Harlan swallowed hard and nodded. I will. Later that night, Malik sat on his porch with Naomi, recounting the moment. She listened quietly, then said, Dad, do you realize what happened tonight? The man who mocked you stood in front of the city and admitted he was wrong. That's the power of respect. You turned your enemy into a student. Malik exhaled slowly, watching the stars glint through the haze. Respect turned him, not me, and that's the point. It was never about me. Naomi leaned her head against his shoulder. Still, you showed us the way. Malik smiled faintly. Maybe, but tonight proved respect can teach itself now. Across Houston, word spread of the forum where a disgraced officer admitted his failure and a veteran chose dignity over vengeance. For many, it was the clearest proof yet that respect wasn't just law or speeches. It was lived, even in the hardest moments. And for Malik Turner, that was enough. The morning after the forum, Houston buzzed with quiet astonishment. Newspapers ran headlines not just about Malik Turner, but about Brent Harlan's unexpected appearance. Disgraced officer admits failure at Respect Forum. Editorials debated whether his words signaled true change or another performance. Malik read none of them. Instead, he sat on his porch, cane across his lap, a mug of tea in hand. For the first time in months, he felt lighter, as though a weight he hadn't realized he was still carrying had shifted onto the shoulders of others. Naomi joined him, phone buzzing with messages. Dad, people are saying last night's forum was the turning point. That respect finally proved it isn't just a slogan. It's something people can learn, even the ones who once mocked it. Malik smiled faintly. Then maybe respect has finally outgrown me. Good. That's what I wanted all along. Across town, Harlan rose early. Instead of hiding, he walked to the community shelter where he'd been volunteering. This time, he arrived before the doors opened, broom in hand, sweeping the sidewalk clean. The shelter director raised an eyebrow. You're early. Harlan shrugged. Respect starts before anyone's watching, right? The director studied him, then nodded. Keep showing up. One day, people will believe you mean it. As the doors opened, Harlan served breakfast to a line of men and women who had nothing but hunger in their eyes. Some recognized him. A few muttered under their breath. But one man, a veteran in a faded cap, accepted the bowl with a nod. Respect, the veteran said simply. The word struck deeper than any applause. Back at NASA, Malik returned to his quiet refuge. Screens hummed with streams of data, engineers tapped keyboards, and for once, no one asked him for speeches. He helped troubleshoot a minor glitch in satellite telemetry, his hands steady, his mind calm. Maya Ortiz approached with a smile. Feels good, doesn't it? To just be an engineer again. Malik nodded. Respect doesn't need me in front of cameras anymore. It's moving on its own. That means I can go back to doing what I love. Maya chuckled. And what you love is fixing things. Maybe that's all you've been doing from the start. That evening, another Respect Forum was held, this time led by students. Naomi insisted Malik attend, though only as a listener. The high school gym buzzed with energy as teenagers took the stage. One student said, respect isn't about standing for applause, it's about standing up when no one else will. Another added, we're the first generation to grow up with the Respect Act. We won't let it be just words. Malik sat quietly in the bleachers, eyes shining. For the first time, he saw proof that the movement had found its true heirs, not veterans or lawmakers, but the young. Meanwhile, Harlan kept attending the veterans' circle. Each week, he spoke less of himself and listened more. He heard stories of sacrifice, loss, and resilience. One evening, he admitted, I thought a badge gave me respect, but I see now, respect is earned in how you treat people, not in what you wear. An older veteran clapped his shoulder. Now live it. Day by day. Respect isn't a speech, it's a habit. For once, Harlan didn't argue. He just nodded. In Houston's neighborhoods, small signs of change appeared. Officers paused to listen before issuing commands. Teachers wove lessons of dignity into their classrooms. Neighbors greeted each other with warmer words. Respect wasn't perfect, but it was practiced, and that was enough. Malik saw it everywhere. In the calm at a grocery checkout, in the patience at a bus stop, in the nods exchanged between strangers. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was ordinary, and therefore powerful. One night, Malik and Naomi walked home from a forum. Fireflies blinked in the humid air, and the city hummed softly around them. Naomi broke the silence. "Dad, do you realize what's happened? Respect doesn't live in courtrooms anymore. It lives here, in streets, in homes. You don't have to carry it alone." Malik exhaled, shoulders easing. "Good, because I never wanted to carry it forever. I just wanted to remind people it mattered." Naomi smiled. "And you did. Now they're reminding each other." Malik looked up at the stars, steady above the haze. For the first time, he believed respect might last, not because of him, but because of everyone else. Malik Turner hadn't set foot in a spotlight for weeks. He still attended respect forums, but now he chose the back row, Kane resting quietly by his side, listening as others spoke. Each time he saw a young officer stand to share what the act had taught him, or a teenager describe how respect had changed her school, Malik felt the same relief. The word no longer needed him. At a Saturday forum in a packed high school auditorium, the moderator asked, "Would Sergeant Turner like to say a few words?" Malik rose slowly, his voice calm. "Respect was never mine to own. It belongs to all of you. And tonight proves you don't need me in front of a microphone anymore. My time speaking is done. My time listening is what matters now." The crowd applauded, not with chants or cheers, but with quiet reverence. For Malik, that was more powerful than thunder. Across Houston, signs of progress unfolded daily. Officers were filmed calmly resolving disputes, not escalating them. Schools created respect councils, led by students. Community boards added dignity check-ins before every meeting. What had started as one salute had grown into a rhythm, ordinary but strong. Naomi noticed the shift in her father too. One evening, sitting on the porch, she said, "Dad, you look lighter, like you finally set something down." Malik smiled faintly. "Maybe I have. Respect doesn't need me anymore. That's the peace I was waiting for." Naomi leaned against his shoulder. "Then justice has really stood." Meanwhile, Brent Harlan faced his own test. After weeks of volunteering at the shelter and attending veterans circles, he felt steadier. But redemption was fragile. One evening, leaving the shelter, he saw a commotion on the street. A young man being shouted at by two others near a bus stop. Old instincts surged. For years, Harlan's response would have been anger, dominance, control. But tonight he hesitated, remembering the veteran's words. Respect waits for men who admit they were wrong. He stepped forward cautiously. "Hey," he said firmly but calmly, "let's slow this down. No one needs to get hurt." The two aggressors turned, recognizing him. One sneered. "You're that cop, the one who mocked the veteran." Harlan's throat tightened. "Yeah, that was me, and I was wrong." The words surprised even him. He continued, "I can't erase what I did, but I can choose better now. So let's do this differently. Walk away." The men muttered, but after a tense moment, they stepped back, disappearing into the night. The young man at the bus stop looked at Harlan cautiously. "Why'd you help me?" he asked. Harlan exhaled. "Because respect isn't optional anymore. Not for me, not for anyone." The boy nodded slowly. For the first time, Harlan felt he'd lived his new words instead of just saying them. At the next respect forum, whispers spread that Harlan had intervened peacefully. Some remained skeptical, but others began to nod, cautiously acknowledging his effort. The facilitator of the Veterans Circle said, "Respect isn't about perfection. It's about practicing until it becomes who you are. Keep practicing, Harlan." He nodded. "I will." Back at NASA, Malik worked quietly with his team, fine-tuning satellite software. Maya Ortiz leaned over his shoulder, grinning. "You're smiling. Haven't seen that in months." Malik chuckled. "I'm smiling because I'm back to being what I was always meant to be, an engineer, not a symbol." Maya smirked. "Too late. You'll always be both." Malik shook his head. "Then let the world carry the symbol. I'll carry the work." That evening, Malik and Naomi walked home through their neighborhood. Children rode bikes along the sidewalks, families greeted one another on porches, and the air carried a peace Malik hadn't felt in years. Naomi said softly, "This is what you gave them, Dad? A city learning how to breathe?" Malik looked around, cane tapping gently on the pavement. "No, this is what they gave themselves. I just reminded them." Naomi smiled. "Then you finally let go." He nodded, eyes on the horizon where stars blinked faintly above the city. "Yes, respect lives without me now, and that's the only legacy I ever wanted." Across town, Harlan sat outside the shelter after another long shift. hands blistered but steady. For months he had been haunted by shame. Tonight, he felt something different, not pride, not absolution, but the fragile beginnings of belonging. He whispered to himself, "Respect waited, and I chose it. Maybe that's enough for today." For the first time, he believed it might be. Winter settled gently over Houston. The air was crisp, evenings longer, the city lit with strings of holiday lights. For Malik Turner, life had grown quieter. He still walked his neighborhood with his cane, but fewer people stopped him now. Not because they had forgotten, but because respect had become part of the city's rhythm. At the last Respect Forum of the year, the community center overflowed. Students led presentations about projects in their schools. Officers spoke about reforms in their precincts. Veterans shared stories of dignity rediscovered. Malik sat in the back row, cane across his knees, Naomi at his side. When the moderator asked if he'd like to speak, Malik shook his head. "Tonight belongs to them." Naomi squeezed his hand. "You finally passed it on, Dad." On stage, a teenage girl read an essay. "Respect isn't about fame. It's about the way we treat each other when no one's looking. If Sergeant Turner reminded us of that, then our job is to keep reminding each other." The crowd applauded. Malik's chest swelled. Not with pride, but with peace. The movement no longer lived in his voice, it lived in theirs. Meanwhile, across the city, Brent Harlan prepared for his own reckoning. The shelter director had asked him to share at the forum. At first he resisted. "They don't want to hear from me." The director looked him in the eye. Accountability means speaking, not hiding. Respect means owning your story where it matters most. So Harlan arrived that evening, shoulders stiff, duffel bag slung at his side. The crowd murmured as he entered. Some frowned, others whispered. Still, he walked forward and took the microphone. "I was the officer who mocked Malik Turner," he said plainly. "I thought my badge gave me respect. I thought power meant dignity. I was wrong. I lost my career, my city, and nearly myself. For months I ran, until I realized the only way forward was through accountability." He paused, voice heavy. "I can't undo what I did, but I can prove one day at a time that I've changed. I've been volunteering here, learning from veterans, listening more than speaking. Respect waited for me. Now I choose it daily, and I'll keep choosing it until the day I die." The room was quiet. Then, slowly veterans nodded. Teachers murmured. A few clapped, not with enthusiasm, but with acknowledgement. From the back, Malik rose. Cane steady, he met Harlan's eyes across the room. Respect isn't erased by one moment, and it isn't proven by one speech. It's proven in practice. If you're truly practicing, then let the city see it. Not through words, but through living. Harlan nodded, voice breaking. "I will." After the forum, Malik and Harlan met briefly in the hallway. For the first time, there was no hostility, only a fragile truce. "Sergeant Turner," Harlan said, "I don't expect forgiveness." Malik studied him. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give, but accountability is yours to keep. Prove respect every day. That's all anyone can ask." Harlan exhaled, shoulders easing. "Thank you." Back at home, Malik sat on his porch, Naomi beside him. The medal from Veterans Day lay on the table, its ribbon catching the porch light. He traced its edge thoughtfully. Naomi asked, "Do you feel finished, Dad?" Malik gazed at the quiet street, children laughing faintly in the distance, neighbors greeting each other warmly. "Not finished, just at peace. Respect isn't mine anymore. It belongs to the city, to these people. I don't need to carry it." Naomi smiled softly. "You already passed the torch." Malik nodded, looking at the stars steady above the haze. And it kept burning. Across Houston, murals still bore his image, but newer ones showed children holding candles, officers shaking hands with citizens, veterans saluting teachers. Respect had evolved. It was no longer tied to one man or one salute. It was ordinary, lived, practiced. For Malik Turner, that was the truest justice. And for Brent Harlan, sweeping the shelter floor late at night, serving soup with blistered hands, and listening in silence at veterans' meetings, respect became not redemption, but a path. A path he would walk every day, without shortcuts, without applause. In the end, the city remembered not the insult in the courtroom, but the salute that answered it. A salute that said respect is not optional. A salute that sparked a movement, And in the quiet of his porch, Malik Turner whispered the only words he needed. Justice stood. Respect endured.